Be me, Jake, 45, head of logistics for a regional grocery chain, third generation. My grandfather started as a stock boy in 1952. My dad worked his way up to district manager. I've been here 23 years. Started loading trucks at 19, never left. The company is old school, family-owned, or at least it was, until the original family sold their majority stake 5 years ago to a private equity firm. But the culture stuck. We run a tight ship. Perishables move fast, shelves stay stocked, and we don't lose money on spoilage. That's the whole business. My department is small but mighty. Me, Frank the warehouse manager, 62 years old, knows every pallet in every bay by memory. And Rosa, who runs our delivery scheduling, 48, 3 kids, never missed a deadline in 12 years. We're the ones who make sure the lettuce isn't brown and the ice cream isn't soup by the time it hits the stores. We don't get credit for it. Nobody ever calls the CEO to say, "Hey, the milk arrived cold today." But when something goes wrong, oh, you better believe the phone rings. That's fine. We're not here for parades. We're here to do a job. The trouble started in January. New CEO. Her name is Priya. She came from a meal kit delivery startup that went under after burning through $80 million of venture capital. Her LinkedIn is a masterpiece of nonsense. Growth hacking. Consumer-centric disruption. Agile transformation. She gave a speech in the company cafeteria her first week. Talked for 45 minutes about changing the narrative around grocery logistics. Said the old model was extractive and siloed, and that we needed to build a more intuitive flow state between procurement and the end user. Frank was standing next to me, eating a sad sandwich. He leaned over and whispered, "What the hell is a flow state?" "I think it means trucks," I said. She could have just said trucks. She's not a trucks person, Frank. No kidding. The first sign of trouble came in February. Priya hired a director of vibes. No, that wasn't the official title. The official title was Head of Workplace Culture and Organizational Energy. But everyone called her the Director of Vibes. Her name was Brittany. She was 26. Brittany's first act was to replace the clock-in system. We'd used the same time clocks for 15 years. Punch in, punch out. Simple. Brittany said the old system was authoritarian and created a culture of surveillance. She replaced it with something called Trust Track, which was basically an honor system where employees logged their own hours on an app that looked like it was designed by a children's cartoon network. Within 2 weeks, the warehouse crew had discovered they could just not log their breaks, or log overtime they didn't work, or clock in from home. Frank came to my office furious, holding a printout showing that 3 guys on the night shift had allegedly worked 47 hours in a 4-day period. "Jake, this is theft," he said. "It's not theft," I said. "It's vibes. Don't start with that." "Frank, I'm serious. This is what she wants. She's measuring trust, not ours. We complain about this. We're the bad guys. So, what do? We wait. I hated saying it. But I'd seen this movie before. The new boss comes in, hires a bunch of useless people, changes things that don't need changing, and anyone who points out the obvious gets labeled a cynic or a hater or whatever word they're using this week. The only winning move is to let the disaster unfold and be standing there when they finally realize they need someone who actually knows what they're doing. March was worse. Priya announced a company-wide reimagining of our operational philosophy. She brought in a consultant named Devon, who charged $15,000 for a 2-day workshop. Devon had hair like a male model and wore sneakers with his suit. He talked about breaking down the hierarchical binaries and co-creating a more fluid accountability structure. What that meant, as far as I could tell, was that nobody had to report to anyone anymore. No managers, no supervisors, just circles and squads and guilds. The warehouse now had a throughput guild, the guys who unload trucks, and a cold chain circle, the guys who work in the freezer, and a last mile squad, the drivers. No one was in charge of any of it. They were just supposed to self-organize around shared objectives. Frank came to my office again. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. "Jake, the freezer guys are taking 3-hour lunches. How is that possible? They voted on it. In their circle meeting. They said they needed more recovery time because the cold was energetically draining. I'm not making this up. They literally said that. Where's their supervisor? There's no supervisor. That's the point. They're self-organizing. So who's stocking the frozen foods? Nobody, Jake. That's what I'm telling you. The frozen food aisle at the Maple Street store has been empty for 2 days because the cold chain circle decided to have a wellness retreat in the break room. I closed my eyes. I could feel a headache forming behind my left eye. Where's Rosa in all this? Rosa quit. I opened my eyes. What? She put in her notice yesterday. She said she's not going to be part of a clown show. Her words, not mine. Rosa was the best scheduler I'd ever worked with. She could route 50 trucks through a blizzard and still have everyone home for dinner. Losing her was a catastrophe, but she was right to leave. The place was falling apart, and Priya and Brittany were too busy taking credit for cultural transformation to notice that the milk was spoiling and the shelves were empty. The breaking point was the spinach. Here's the thing about spinach. It has a shelf life of about 3 days from harvest to store. If it sits in a warm warehouse for an extra 12 hours, it turns into green slime. Our entire system was built around moving spinach from the farm to the refrigerated truck, to the cold storage, to the store in under 72 hours. It required precision. It required discipline. It required people doing their jobs. The first week of April, a truckload of organic spinach arrived at the distribution center. $50,000 worth. The cold chain circle had voted to pause receiving because they were in the middle of a gratitude circle and didn't want to interrupt the positive energy flow. The spinach sat on the loading dock, in the sun, for 6 hours. By the time someone finally thought to check on it, the spinach was soup. $50,000 of soup. And because Brittany's trust track system meant no one had officially been on the clock when it happened, there was no way to even figure out who was responsible. The cold chain circle held an emergency meeting and concluded that the spinach's untimely transition was a learning opportunity and that they would hold space for the experience. I found Frank in the warehouse, staring at 50 pallets of rotting greens. He didn't say anything. He just pointed. I know, Frank. The smell is going to be here for a week. I know. I'm too old for this. You and me both. We stood there for a while, just breathing through our mouths. Then Frank asked the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. When do we pull the ripcord? Not yet, I said. But start getting your resume ready. Already did. Good man. The spinach incident finally got the attention of the private equity guys. They're not sentimental people. They care about one thing: money. And when you throw away $50,000 of inventory because your employees were having a gratitude circle, that gets their attention. They sent a guy named Harrison to assess the situation. Harrison was in his 50s, bald, wore a suit that cost more than my car. He spent a day walking around the warehouse, looking at empty shelves and rotting produce, and the cold chain circle playing ping pong during their third recovery break of the morning. At the end of the day, he called a meeting. Priya, Brittany, me, Frank, and a few other department heads. Harrison sat at the head of the table and didn't say anything for a full minute. He just looked at each of us, one by one, like he was reading our obituaries. Then he said, "Explain." Priya went first. She talked for 10 minutes about the transformation journey and the culture shift and the need to trust the process. She used the word holistic 4 times. She said the spinach was an unfortunate but necessary part of the growth arc. Brittany jumped in, adding that the cold chain circle had done a beautiful debrief and that everyone was feeling really aligned on the learnings. Harrison didn't look at them. He looked at me. What do you think, Jake? I could have played it safe. I could have given some corporate non-answer about needing to evaluate the data, but I was tired. I was so tired. I think this place is burning down and they're handing out s'mores, I said. The room went silent. Priya's smile froze. Brittany's eyes went wide. Go on, Harrison said. Sir, we've lost our best scheduler because she couldn't take the nonsense anymore. The warehouse has no management structure, so nobody's accountable for anything. The time tracking system is a joke, so we're paying people for hours they're not working. And today, we threw away $50,000 of spinach because a bunch of 20-somethings were having a feelings circle instead of doing their jobs. Gratitude circle, Brittany corrected. I looked at her. I don't care what it's called. It cost us $50,000. Harrison wrote something in a notebook. He turned to Priya. Is this accurate? Priya stammered. Well, I think Jake is being a bit dramatic. There's a lot of nuance too. Ma'am, I don't want nuance. I want to know if you're aware that your workforce is playing ping pong while the inventory rots. Brittany jumped in again. It's about work-life balance and preventing burnout. The inventory is rotting, Harrison repeated slowly. The shelves are empty. The customers are going to other stores. Can you please explain to me how ping pong solves any of that? Priya opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I think there's been a misalignment in our execution, she finally said. Harrison nodded slowly. He wrote something else in his notebook. Then he closed it, stood up, and looked at me. Jake, I'd like to see you in my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Bring your ideas for fixing this mess. He walked out. Didn't look at Priya or Brittany again. The next morning, I showed up with Frank. Harrison had asked for my ideas, but Frank had forgotten more about logistics than I'd ever know. If I was going in, he was coming with me. Harrison's office was temporary, just a spare conference room they'd cleared out. He had a laptop, a phone, and a legal pad. No pictures on the wall. No personal touches. This was a man who was not planning to stay long. Sit down, he said. Tell me what you need. I looked at Frank. Frank nodded. 3 things, I said. First, Priya and Brittany are gone. Today. They can't be in the building while we're trying to fix this. They'll undermine everything. Harrison wrote it down. Done. Next. Second, I need my old management structure back. Supervisors, shift leads, time clocks, real accountability. The whole self-organizing thing is a disaster. Maybe it works for a tech startup, but we're moving perishable goods. There's no room for interpretation. Agreed. Third, I need a signing bonus. For me and for Frank. And raises for anyone who's been here more than 5 years. We're about to ask a lot of people to work a lot harder than they've been working, and they need to know it's worth their while. Harrison didn't even blink. How much? I told him. He wrote it down. Anything else? Yeah, I said. One more thing. When this is over, I want Priya's old job, not some co-leadership role or whatever nonsense title she invented. I want to be the person in charge of operations. And I want it in my contract that no one from culture can overrule my decisions without going through you first. Harrison looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile. You know, he said, when the partners sent me down here, they told me to figure out what was wrong and fix it. I was expecting to have to fire everyone and start over. But maybe I don't have to. He stood up and extended his hand. You've got the job, Jake. Don't make me regret it. I shook his hand. I won't. True to his word, Harrison had Priya and Brittany out of the building by noon. I watched them walk out, carrying their branded tote bags and their succulents and their good vibes only coffee mugs. Priya was crying. Brittany was on her phone, probably updating her LinkedIn. They didn't look at me. I didn't feel bad for them. Frank and I spent the next week working 18-hour days. We reinstated the time clocks. We put supervisors back in charge of every shift. We called Rosa and offered her double her old salary to come back, and she said yes before I finished the sentence. We cleaned out the break room, threw away the ping-pong table, and put up a whiteboard with the daily shipment schedule. The cold chain circle held one last meeting to complain about the return to oppressive structures. Frank attended the meeting, listened to their concerns, and then fired 2 of them for attendance violations. The rest got the message. By the end of the 2nd week, the shelves were full again. The milk was cold. The spinach was arriving on time and leaving the same day. The private equity guys stopped calling Harrison every hour. A month later, the board made it official. I was promoted to Vice President of Operations. Frank became my Director of Warehouse Logistics. Rosa took over as Head of Distribution Planning. We gave raises to everyone who'd stuck it out through the nonsense. The other day, I was walking through the warehouse and I saw a kid, maybe 22, new hire, fresh out of some community college program, standing in front of the whiteboard, staring at the shipment schedule. He looked lost. "You need something?" I asked. Yeah," he said. "I'm trying to figure out who's in charge of the cold storage transfers." "That's Frank. His office is through that door." "Okay, cool. And who do I talk to about time off?" "Also, Frank." "So Frank is the guy for everything?" "Pretty much. That's..." He paused, searching for the word. "Efficient." I nodded. "That's the idea." He walked off toward Frank's office. I stood there for a moment, looking at the warehouse, the hum of the refrigeration units, the beeping of forklifts, the sound of work getting done. No gratitude circles, no wellness retreats, no trust falls, just cold spinach, right where it belonged. I smiled and went back to my office.